The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André and I'm your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another fun-filled show. Today's guest is one Isabel Burke, who is a illustrator, comic artist, and works on some children's books, a few other things. Has a part of the Friction compilation book coming out, which we'll talk about during the show. Thankfully enough, this came to me through Carla Nappi, who was a previous guest on the show. You can go check out that episode. She's working on this anthology series as well, and had the good graces to forward me some information to help promote the book, and also put me in touch with several people involved with it as well. So I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk to new people, and very thankful to Carla for passing on that information, and also for Isabel for making her time available. Very happy to have new folks in the show. So if you have any guest suggestions or know anyone that's an artsy type or involved with comics or anything in the nerd realm, as I like to call it, feel free to send them my way. Be happy to do it. It's a joy and a pleasure talking to people, and generally I really connect well with artistic types anyway, and I find they're always great conversations. Normally we meander a little, and I certainly do some of that now. But yeah, it's good. It's like I feel like the point of the show is to really give the flavor of who these people are. Not necessarily just to say this is what you've done, but generally talking about where they come from and the things they have done and the influences that have led them to that always sort of help flesh out who they are as humans, as individuals. And I feel like I get a good vibe of that with Isabel in this episode. Great chat with her, great talk, and kindred spirit in the artistic type, and a fan of Guillermo Del Toro, so good to my books, but that's coming along very shortly. As far as what's going on in the real world, I am still working over on the X-rated X-Men Inmate Review Show with producer Davin on that show, so be sure to check that out wherever you get your podcasts, in which we discuss and watch right now we're on X-Men 97, watching that show. Previously we'd watched the original run of that program, and then in between the interim we did some of the movies, which we will be picking up again, I guess, once the new X-Men 97 show is done. And we have other ways of filming some X-Men related content. We may go into another series as well. Who knows? We will see what the world has to offer as we get along. But it's been a real fun joy getting through that with Davin and all those things as well. So we're getting into season for conventions in this neck of the woods. I'm sure wherever you are, it's also in that neck of the woods. I know the East Coast Comic Expo is coming up, which is a big one out here. CaperCon, the Yarmouth Comic Festival. These are all things that happen here in Nova Scotia, but I'm sure in your neck of the woods, or the East Coast Comic Expo is in Moncton, but I'm sure in your neck of the woods you have your own Comic Cons coming on. So I will be at a few of those, whatever ones I can, selling my art, and whatever ones I can't be at, be sure to attend. It's a great time to check out your local Comic Con, go support local artists, see what they have to offer. I'm always amazed and thrilled at seeing some of the products that other folks come up with, some of the mashups, some of the ideas, some of the crafts. It's always amazing, the innovation that some of the nerds at these events create, and offer up for the public to buy. So it's a great time to get out there and do that sort of thing. So check your local listings, whatever those may be now, to see where your local Comic-Con is and drop in. It's always a fun time. But, I was going to prattle on a little longer about some other stuff. I do have a dinner theater coming up, which I am now in the full rush of. Lots of rehearsals, we're pretty much down to crunch time. Opening day is very soon. By the time you listen to this, it will have happened already. But I am kind of in full crunch for that, so I'm going to try to save my energy so I can get it on the stage to the dinner theater folk. You know, the deep, rich, artistically rewarding event that is dinner theaters. Is that sarcasm? Maybe a little, but that might be a future episode's chat. But the focus of today, of course, is Isabel Burke, who is, as I mentioned before, involved with this fiction book and a lot of other cool projects coming down the pipeline. She couldn't talk about a few of them, but make sure to check out her socials and see what those are when she's allowed to talk about them. And I will try to promote what I can as things come out as well. Great chat with Isabel, and yeah, why not listen to it? Here it is, my talk with Isabel Burke.
Yeah, my family's from Texas, so I spent a lot of time there, but it probably was a bio that I forgot to update somewhere. But yeah, so I spent most of my life in Texas, and I moved for school, and I really like it here, so I decided to stay.
Oh, what'd you take in school?
Illustration and sequential art, so comics. I minored in sequential art, so most of my study was illustrative, but I've kind of been veering more into comics recently. So
That's awesome. See, that sort of
yeah,
doesn't boggle my mind, but like, because I grew up in like a fairly rural area, so the idea that you can like your whole school course could be comics is just like amazing to me.
yeah, it was not something that I really planned on. I think it took me probably half of my life before college to realize art was something that I could do professionally. I was
Really?
like, oh, yeah. I always really liked like Pixar and stuff. I wanted to do animation at first, and then it's like, I don't know if that's for me. So I like the storytelling aspect of it. So that's what got me into comics. And I also didn't realize you could just go and learn about that for 4 years straight. So when I learned about that, it was like, okay, I think that's the only option for me at this point. So it's I was really lucky to get to do that. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Well, it's funny talking to most folks like creative types. It seems like they all get pushed into animation from a young age because I think like parents or people that like don't really understand, I mean, or don't really care about art, only see that as like one of the things you can make money at the most. You know, is getting into a world like that. Um,
Yeah.
I know I heard it my whole life as a kid. It's just like, oh, you should go draw for Disney someday, and that was like the only thing that people could like figure out would be a career. You know?
Yeah, no, for sure. That was probably part of why I started off thinking that that was the only thing I could do. It was like Disney, tattoo artist, or do like children's books. And I'm doing children's books now. So, like, that's where a lot of the bread and butter is, because obviously that's going to be very heavily illustrated. But yeah, it definitely does kind of, in a mainstream sense, really get pushed on you. And I think obviously the financial aspect is going to be a barrier for a lot of people. And that
I love.
tends to slow most people down. But
I like the tattoo
um,
artist was an option. That's not one that I heard growing up, but it makes sense. It'd be a great one, actually.
oh, yeah, no,
I just love career
yeah.
day. There's like a tattoo artist like setting up, like
That would be
that would
cool.
be really
I'd be
cool.
interested to
Yeah,
like
me
learn more
too.
about it.
Hey, missed my
Um,
calling.
yeah, that was definitely not what my parents pushed on me, but I feel like in like school, people would be like, "You could be a tattoo artist." I was like, "I could. I don't know if that's what I want to do, but
I feel like there's a subculture to that like it's like I don't want to like generalize because like I have a lot of tattoos, but I'm not like,
yeah,
I'm not like just in the way that I like art, so it kind of it's my way of celebrating it a little bit on myself as well. But
yeah,
there's like a weird sort of subculture to that I feel like you need to fall into. Like I feel like you
for
need to be an
sure.
incredible like a completely tattooed person to do that and like have a million
Yeah.
piercings. Like my tattoo artist is a bigger fella and he's covered in them, but then he just got his head done, like it's the whole top of his head.
Ooh,
So now when I
that's
go to
so
him,
intense.
I know it's awesome. He looks cool, but it's like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Like
that's crazy to have to sit through. I have like three tattoos, so I'm
mhm,
very new to it, but like I was talking to my tattoo artist who also studied at the illustration school, and like
mhm,
she was talking about how people kind of assume that that's what they want to do because like illustration, like it makes sense. It seems like a good like kind of independent way, if you don't like having a corporate structure to the way that you make art.
mhm.
But she was talking about how it like people who assume they can because they're good at art, like it's not the only prerequisite. Like obviously it's so much more like carnal because you're dealing with people's bodies and like
Mhm.
the stakes are pretty high, I can imagine. So she was talking about it, and yeah, I don't know that I could have it in me to get my entire body tattooed. I like having them on, but I was like, I don't know. And then if people saw me, having five tattoos and tattooing other people, like I don't, that doesn't really give me the credibility that I'm sure people would probably want.
Yeah, which is kind of nuts. Like it seems to be the only industry that like that's the way it rolls. Like, you wouldn't expect it like I don't know, like in a way that I'm trying to think of like a modern example, but you need someone that's like a surgeon that need to have like 100 surgeries to be like a proper surgeon.
Right.
Like
It is, yeah, that is strange
yeah.
to think about the way that it's like it has to apply to you as well. But I
Mhm.
mean, I'm sure there are probably tattoo artists out there who are a little bit more minimally
Oh, maybe so.
tattooed themselves.
Yeah, it seems
I
like
haven't seen them yet.
yeah, ditto. But it seems like they're like tattooers specifically have like a very like specific relationship with the clients. It seems like they kind of like it's rare that like it's not like a sort of industry where you just walk in and get your one tattoo and go. Like it's like someone walking in to get you to do like an illustration job or something. You do the one book and then
Right.
that might be it. But it seems like most people are like repeat customers. People keep coming back.
Yeah. When I first started getting them, people were always like it's an addiction, and I think that's so interesting that like you kind of get hooked. I do want to get more, but I'm like kind of taking my time. I don't know if I'm going back to the same people because I might not be around by the time, I
Mhm.
decide to get it and I might be out of town. But it's an interesting subculture, but
Yeah.
definitely not for me, I don't think. But I can
Yeah.
appreciate it from a distance.
Yeah, ditto.
So,
Yeah, I like them. Like, and I get the addiction thing. I've heard that before as well. But it's kind of like a lot of them are sort of like one was to cover one was like a couple of tributes for cats that we lost, and
aw.
things like that. But they just sort of like. I also have a side job being a professional wrestler, so it kind of
Oh
plays
wow.
into that a little bit as well.
Yeah,
Just for the appearance of your character.
the
Um,
visuals for
but
sure.
I don't
Yeah.
enjoy it. Like people that are like, I love getting tattoos, and it's like I don't enjoy the actual period. I'd be very happy if I could be gassed and wake up after it's done and then go about my day.
Anesthesia. Yeah, no, same. I'm kind of a big wimp about needles. So the fact that I even sat down and let them do that, I was kind of surprised. So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, right on.
So,
So
yeah.
you mentioned growing up in Texas. What
Mhm.
part of Texas were you in?
Austin.
Oh, okay.
So
So
yeah,
if I understand,
good
it's
place to grow up.
very liberal part of
Yeah.
Texas, if I'm understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I grew up probably a little bit outside of it. So it was a little bit more conservative. It wasn't that far out. It was like 15 minutes, but it was enough of its own separate little enclave that I wouldn't describe it as like an overtly liberal area, but it
No.
was, I mean, better than most parts of Texas, I think.
Yeah.
I went to a pretty big school district, so there was a lot of different people and a lot of, immigrants. And so it was, I wouldn't describe it as overly conservative, but that was not something that was lost on me despite that. So um, it's a very different place now. It's kind of sad going back, and a lot of people talk about that of the whole tech shift, which makes me kind of sad as somebody who lived there for most of my adolescence. And but it's a nice place. I like going back. So
And
yeah,
brothers and sisters?
yeah. I have a brother, and he's also a creative type, which is funny because neither of our parents are. Um,
What do they do?
I don't know how that happened. Yeah, no, I'm not sure. He's a really good photographer and also an illustrator. So he doesn't do it professionally, but he's very talented, and I'm kind of glad he doesn't because if he did, then I don't know. I feel it's a weird relationship to have with your work when you monetize it and kind of rely on it. So I'm kind of glad he spared himself of that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's something I guess I've talked about before with previous guests, but that's something that gets discussed a ton. Is like this, most folks have the regular 9 to 5 job, and hopefully they enjoy that work or whatever they do. But like I'm a graphic designer, like as a
Hmm.
general day to day, but I do like little art stuff and here and there, and I did some indie comics that were just stuff I wanted to do and self-publish. That I'd like to get back to, but it's been a while. But the idea that like it kind of never I find for me it never turns off. Like, I can't people are like, "Well, how's your work going?" And I'm like, "Well, like when I started working for myself, I thought I'd have more time to do things. But now I just have less free time because like I feel guilty if I have free time to just go watch a movie instead
Hmm.
of when I could be working or doing something. So the nights just get
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah, for sure. I have that too. I was working part-time like service industry
Mhm.
after I graduated, and I was working freelance part-time. And I have the same thing now because I'm totally freelance, and it's like it's so hard to have that cutoff of like when, you know, work stops because it's always like ongoing. The projects last a couple weeks. So it's like, well, I could be watching this and kind of vegetating on my couch, or I could be sitting and getting a little bit more work done. And it is hard to balance that, like,
Mm.
well, you know, and then it's really hard when you want to make something for yourself too. And then you're like, they're going to see me posting silly drawings and you're like, well, why isn't it done? Because I want to draw something for myself, please. Like,
Yeah, like just to remind
that's
you why
something.
you enjoy doing it, right?
Right. Yeah. Something that you're not being paid to do, we're told to do it. It's important, but I always do feel a little guilty about it. So what can you do?
You said your
So,
folks weren't creative types. What did they do?
my mom has always done kind of stuff in like tech and web development. And then my dad is involved in like stock market stuff, and he's kind of a writer, but for very academic kind of oriented stuff. So
Were they
neither of them were very oriented towards that, but they were very supportive of me and my brother, you know, doing that. So I guess that's all you can ask for. So
That's cool.
yeah.
So you mentioned the Pixar movies being the impetus for like kind of getting into the art side of things.
Mhm.
Is there one specific one that was like the one that really drew you in?
Man, I don't know. It's hard to say because I grew up watching them. That was like my childhood. My dad was a really big Steve Jobs fan, and so he was like very actively following Pixar from its conception, with Steve Jobs being involved at,
Mhm.
you know, at very start of it. So Toy Story was probably the one that would be the most nostalgic for me, just because that was always in my life. You know, A Bug's Life, I have really fond memories of flipping through the like concept art book that my dad had with him, and I didn't really get why that was like a part of it because I was a toddler, but I do have very vivid, distinct memories of just looking through it and just being mesmerized and wondering why they looked different in the book than they did in the movie. And um, yeah, I remember seeing Cars in theaters. It's hard to say just because like I always, all of them were so present in, you know, the media that I consumed. I remember Wally had a big effect on me. That
Mm.
was a really, I think I was kind of finally old enough to start understanding a little bit more about like storytelling, and I don't know, or being curious about it if I didn't understand it. I don't know. So maybe Wally, but all of them I really, you know, they're my babies.
Yeah, it's interesting when you get to the age where I mean, I'm assuming you're significantly younger than me. I'm 38, so
Hmm.
you would because I remember when Toy Story came out, I was a teen. I was probably like 15. Was
Hmm.
maybe 14. But and I loved it, of course. But it's when you get to the when you see animation that is done in a way that like has a message that isn't just like a I don't want to say disposery, but like the kind of thing for kids that it might necessarily have. Like that's what I love Pixar and all their stuff. Like you watch it and there's stuff here for children, but then
Right.
if you're an adult, like watching Inside Out, you're like, man, I can't imagine a kid is going to appreciate this the level that I would, or any other adult would,
For
or anybody
sure.
that's gone through that and now has the foresight of or the gift of foresight that you've been beyond it or hindsight. Um, but even like as a kid, the Iron Giant was the one that was like for me was like this felt different. It wasn't just Bugs
Hmm.
Bunny or something or one of those sort of the
Right.
goofy movie or something. It was like something that was like really, and I mean that movie had its own adult terms too, but that one is the one that
Yeah.
sort of hit me in a way that was kind of marrying that superhero narrative with like some adult stuff and sort of
Yeah, for
really
sure.
playing with those emotional heartstrings.
Yeah, that's a good one. That one really does like,
Yeah.
and I think that one's easy to understand. There's even at a young age, like you can still sort of internalize like the grief of it. And
Mhm.
yeah, I feel like those stories, especially when they can reach that age level of like maybe not understanding. Because I remember watching movies like as a kid and you don't know anything that's happening, and you're just there for like the visuals or the cool robots or whatever. And then, you know, you get older, but if you can still kind of comprehend the sadness in it, I feel like those are always the stories that like, at least for me,
Yeah.
really stuck with me. Like Wally, I think that was one of the ones that was kind of like the, oh my gosh, like
Yeah. Up
That's
was a bad
sad.
one too. Up was one where I was in
Yeah.
the theater and I was watching like that whole little exchange with his wife, and then you get the whole like, and I was just like, oh my
Oh my
God.
gosh.
Like I think I was like literally like, I don't know if it's just as you get older and like stuff hits you a little harder or what, but like I just it and I always kind of gear towards sadder things. I don't know why. It's not like I'm a sad person or anything. I just like
Right.
I like sad music and I like sad, movies. I don't find they
Sure.
make me sad. I don't know. I feel like I'm always happy to if something hits me emotionally in any way, if I
Hmm.
laugh, if I'm, but I feel like sadness when like when you feel sad through art or when you get it hits you in the field, sort of. Um, I feel like it's more earned when it's sad because it's harder to make people sad, I think. With music
Yeah.
or with films, you have to really
Yeah.
know what you're doing to be able to hit those. Oh, is my cat's making an appearance?
I was gonna say hello.
Yes, that's Lebowski. Hey,
Oh,
buddy.
that's awesome.
He tends to make
It's a
appearances
good one.
sometimes. Yeah, he's a good cat. Good boy. Yeah, I feel like because
Dooney.
it's easy to be angry or those sort of things. But like a movie that can really make you feel sad, I find is
Right.
probably one of the harder emotions to sort of in any art form, really. To
Yeah, for sure. I think it's easier to come across as like it's love and sadness that you can really get kind of corny with. And if
Mhm.
you're not careful with how you balance it, it definitely can not strike the right chord. But when
Mhm.
it's done right, it's just such like a poignant feeling that even
Mhm.
if you're not yourself sad, it's very easy to draw from the characters and relate to. I'm the same way. I
Yeah.
listen to like really sad music, and my partner's always like, "What? Like, how are you not depressed?" And I'm like, "Well,
Mine too. She's always
yeah,
like, she's like, Wilco again? Is this not, And I'm like, I like it.
yeah,
But it's funny.
no,
Yeah,
it's
well,
a
it's funny those two things like romance and sad movies tend to be the same. Not
mm-hmm,
always, but they often are like, and all those John Green books or the Nicholas Sparks one where there's some kind of I've only seen a couple of them, they're not really my thing, but where like, there's always some big love story that's always tragically ripped apart, and then there's a little bit of hope somewhere, but then not
right,
really, like it always kind of plays with that. Or every romance movie has that portion where the couple fight and then they don't like each other
right.
until the big
Yeah, that's the
reconciliation.
stakes. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it has to happen. Yeah, no, I was a teenager when the John Green like that was huge when I was
Mhm.
like in middle school and high school. So I kind of I was part of that for a little bit, and it definitely does like you have to have the sadness to have the the happy ending because
Mhm.
other than that it's just kind of monotone the whole story. So um no, it's a good emotion. It's a fun emotion to play with and connect to, and especially if you can get other people to connect with you. So
Sure.
um no, I
So
definitely agree with you.
when did you come to comics? Were you reading comics when you were younger as well, or is that just something that came much later?
I definitely read them as a kid. I remember my local library had like a big fat collection of like old superhero, Superman specifically, like strip comics. They had like a big collection. And I remember flipping through that all the time. And I did like graphic novels. I feel like they weren't as big of a thing then as they are now. Like obviously the industry and that has kind of skyrocketed, and there's a lot more of that geared towards kids and young people. But I remember specifically Rapunzel's Revenge by I think Dean and Shannon Hale,
Mhm.
and that was like my favorite book like for a very long time. It was so fun. I had never seen anything like that, and I don't know if that was because my scope was limited. I'm sure something else is just as cool out there and existed, but for some reason that was like, oh my God. But I never really thought about it as like a career thing. Um, I don't know why I've always drawn. So that was like always something that I was like, I want to do that. That would be nice. Like I said, I didn't think that was something I could do. And then animation was kind of the thing. I was like, I want to do visual development. Like, no, 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 everybody does when they want to go to art school. I feel like that's, and then it just sort of diverges from there. But yeah, so that was not something until I think just after I graduated high school, or maybe senior year, I guess, I kind of started getting into like autobiographical comics just to explore. It was like a heavy year for me, and I started doing these little like 1 to 2 page comics just to like write and get the feeling out. And it was really helpful. And I was like, this is like a nice way to tell a story that is doable for me. And I liked the fact that like in animation, you're working with a team of people and then it goes through other teams and the story is bigger than you. But I liked the intimacy of comics and just being like, I like to collaborate with people. That's not the issue I had with animation. I like other people's creative input and working alongside. And I like doing stuff for other people's writing, but I like having a little bit tighter of a control on the way that the story ends up, looking for the
Mm.
consumer. I like being able to do it and then it's like, well, that's what they're going to see instead of like, I'm going to make this character, it's going to get passed through the pipeline and tweaked and, you know, pushed and pulled and prodded a million different directions. And then it's something a little bit close to what you did at the end. So that was kind of what drew me in later on. And so I decided to minor in it at SCAD, which is where I graduated from. And so I didn't take as many classes as I would have liked to. I kind of feel like I should have taken more looking back on it. There's a really great community of people who make comics here. And as I've been doing it more over the past couple of years, and I'm trying to plan out right now something of my own to write. So I kind of wish I had gotten more involved in it because it was a great space and I met some nice people through there already, but I don't know, as I got into that later in life, it probably would have been cool to get to connect a little bit more with that community. But I'm kind of working on that now in a retroactive sense with people who are out of school and stuff. So, but yeah, that was definitely not something I considered early on, but I always liked in a very mild sense, but I like it more now as I have an appreciation for it. So,
Well, yeah, I think the advent of the like the surge in graphic novels is mostly from obviously film. I mean, there's been so many comic book properties that have been made into TV shows and film, and that have been wildly popular, from the Marvel stuff to The Walking Dead, which I believe is filmed in Georgia, and a
yeah.
lot of those other things that have become huge, that have led people back to them, and
Hmm.
it's really interesting in a way to see such a rise in it. Like, I often talk about how it's bewildering to me that like we're at the level we are now, like with film being so hugely related to comic book properties. Just
Yeah.
because, like, if you had told me I'd see Thanos in a movie when I was a kid, I'd be like, "You're crazy!" Like,
Yeah.
we just got a Blade movie with Wesley Snipes. Like, I don't think we're gonna be seeing Thanos anytime soon. So,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But now it's kind of this level, like, and even side comics that weird little properties like that. Tom Hanks movie, History of, or no, sorry, that's another graphic novel. History of Violence was a graphic novel that like
Hmm.
was up there. Road to Perdition, like Two Guns, like that Mark Wahlberg.
Right.
I had the guy that wrote that comic on just recently, and
Oh, no kidding.
yeah, Stephen Grant. He did a lot of work for Marvel back in the day as
That's
well.
so cool.
And yeah, just like these strange little comic properties, like everything's getting Scott Pilgrim, all these things that are now,
Right.
got big movies or got Netflix shows and everything now. So it feels like everything's
Yeah.
up for grabs. Like, there's no property that's not going to get rehashed and put out there in some manner or another.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because like obviously book adaptations have been a thing, but now that like I feel like comics is obviously just such a more digestible like format of media, the visuals are kind of already laid out. There's a lot
Mm.
of that work is done for them. So it has been interesting. I was like really into Marvel movies specifically as like a teenager, and that was like kind of the shift of like it really was like when I was a kid, it was like a nerd thing to like to read superhero comics, and then it was like as I
Me
grew
too.
up, yeah, the mainstream shift really happened, and that was interesting to watch and inspiring. I don't know if that subconsciously, I'm sure it did to some extent, have a shift on my career change, but yeah. So I think it's a cool. I think it's fun to watch stuff that I like to read turn into visuals. Obviously, sometimes they don't do a great job of it, but what can you do?
Well, it's sort of an easy, I feel like a lot of work gets into showing what the vibe of a series or show would be, right? Like, or movie. They generally would be like, they
Right.
have artist people that are kind of come up with all the thumbnails and like the design of the cities or the style of the show. But with a
Yeah.
comic, you can kind of just give it to them as is and say, well, this is the style. So I feel like it's a
Right.
much easier way for people to visualize what the show would look like,
For
just by
sure.
looking at the source material. So it's
Yeah.
probably a big time saver for Hollywood. But
Yeah.
and
Well, and also the fact that the um like one thing that somebody pointed out to me, because I'm trying to write a graphic novel, it was like you look more at movies as a formatting for the story than you would at a prose novel, which kind of like shifted. I had thought about it because I think, or maybe in a subconscious sense I had, but it's so much easier to think about it when you're thinking about like the visuals and it is presented to you in a way that cinema really does it more so than like a book, and the level of complexity in the story and like the thoughts your characters having. And so I, like you said, it really is like you could bring it to a studio and be like, it's basically adapted for the screen already. But yeah,
I kind of feel
yeah,
like a
I
lot of
think
people
that's
also like, and I don't want to like, who am I to say things like this? But to me, it's like guys like Mark Miller. Like you look at his comics and you're like, this was designed to be a show. Like the people in it, or his movie, like they he draws them to look like existing actors. Like he's already
right.
basically set it up to say, and he sold a lot of his properties, like a ton of them, as
Yeah,
movies and series and stuff now. So
yeah,
some more successful than others, but he has done a ton of them. So it's like,
yeah.
you look at it and you're like, it almost seems like every new graphic novel is like a pitch for a show or a movie.
I think you're right in that way. And I think, especially for kids too, I don't know, it's like very, I wonder if that'll happen more. I feel like right now it's very adult oriented, I feel like, and the things that are coming out, but I wonder if that'll start to happen more with like young people's media in that sense. But
Yeah, and there's things that like bewilder me that haven't been done yet. Like I know they have a Usagi Yojimbo cartoon on Netflix now. I'm not sure if it's still going, but
mhm.
like Bones never been made into a series, which is one of my all-time favorites still. And
Yeah,
I know it came close to Netflix having a deal, but it never worked out. But I'd love to have Jeff on the show someday. I reached out to his team and they're like, maybe we'll get back to you, and I haven't heard back, but someday hopefully. But
yeah, that would be a good one.
yeah, but yeah, like stuff like that, like that just seem like no-brainers to me, because everyone grew up with that stuff, like especially once it
Right.
was like a scholastic book, and then it was everywhere. Um,
Yeah.
so it is weird.
Yeah. You'd think they'd want to bank on the nostalgia because I feel like they're doing that with everything
Oh,
else,
everything like
Disney and the remakes. Like,
yeah, we just got a new X-Men cartoon from the 90s, like
right.
which is
I feel like
great.
they're so close to getting it. And we're
Yeah.
probably just a couple years away. They'll dry up everything else and then they'll have to turn to something. So,
Yeah. That's the attitude that is very nihilistic, but also absolutely correct. There's they are going to run through everything and then just start grabbing everything they can, or just I don't know,
right.
having AI make new stuff. I don't know. Which knows what the
Oh,
future is gonna
God help us.
be. Yeah, I know.
That'll be fun.
Everyone will have 6 fingers, and it'll be like that's the dark future that awaits. We'll see, I guess.
I
But
feel like there's enough people though who value
I hope
like
so.
making stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know I wouldn't want to consume something that was made by a machine, and I feel like there's enough people out there that it's like, okay, we'll just make a new studio of people who are actually going to make it, and people will hopefully appreciate it. I don't know. That's like my glimmer of hope,
I
light
hope
at the
you're
end
right,
of the
and
tunnel.
I hope you're right. I feel as though I don't know if the amount of people that just want to make money would outweigh those people, and that's my concern, because I think there's more of those, unfortunately, because like the artistic process when it comes to books and movies and everything. I mean, it is a marriage of art and business, and and that is why we all get to consume it, why it keeps coming out. But then it's also the reason why sometimes it's terrible, because there's focus groups and producers that want to put their
Right.
stamp on it, and everybody has their own thing.
Analytics.
Yeah, yeah, it's very arbitrary and weird. Like I listened to this podcast that was talking. It's about movies that almost got made but never did. So like it's a cool way to like see weird
Ooh.
sequels or stuff that would have been. They read the scripts sometimes and go through them, and it's heartbreaking because some
Oh,
of them
that's so
sound
cool.
so good. Yeah, it's called
Yeah.
The Best Movies Never Made,
Cool.
and
I'll write that down. I would love to check that out.
Not Josh Olson. He's on another podcast I like. The guy that wrote the Sonic the Hedgehog movies. He's one of the hosts of it,
Okay.
and another guy that did there's a documentary about Jodorowsky's Dune movie that never got made in the 70s that this guy did. So the two
Uh-huh.
of them kind of do this whole thing where they read through the scripts and stuff. And sometimes when they're talking to the people that wrote the scripts or involved with these productions that never happened, they have these weird arbitrary reasons as to why it never got made. They'd be like, oh, we did a remake of The Mummy that would have come out in the 90s, and this would have been before the Brendan Fraser one. It would have been like a straight up horror movie. And then they're like, oh, but then like a zombie movie came out that year, and the producer's like, well, we can't have two slow shambling monsters
Ugh,
this year in cinema. It's like
yeah,
nobody will go to two movies with shambling monsters in them. Heaven
it's so
forbid.
sad. Yeah. I'm in a writer's book club and we were talking about that like literally on Sunday about like the way that publishers kind of have that same thing of like, they get something that works that might be a little bit more different than what the market's demanding, and then everybody loves that, and then suddenly they're looking for like clones of the exact same book, and like the Madeline Miller stuff about Circe and Song of Achilles, and now everybody's looking for Greek mythology retellings, and it's like, well, okay, let's switch it up. Like we don't need, it's kind of like the Oscar bait thing of like we're looking for books that are going to win awards, and then people start to format after the books that just won awards, and it gets like weird and swampy, and
Yeah. Well,
the
how
fact that
many
it's
Hunger Games knockoffs were there, right? Once that came out,
oh I
which is
know,
kind of a knockoff of Battle Royal, but it's like, which came way before that. But then, we get
right,
like the Scorch Trials or whatever, and then the Maze Runner, and then, well, a bunch of different ones that are all sort of the same thing, just slightly
yeah,
different.
it's funny how it works like that. It does make me sad to think of all the good art you lose to some higher up saying no, or we can't do this for some silly arbitrary reason, but it's how it
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah. Well, I
So,
think that's the, sort of the bane of all the people that appreciates, this type of fiction we do. It's like when you
right,
find it and you like it, it's rare. And that's why I guess a lot of movies that are considered like cult classics today didn't do well when they first came out. But are now like everyone loves, like, The Thing is a reference I use. That movie tanked in the box office, but it's like one of the best horror movies ever made. And
yeah,
nobody appreciated then, but they sure do now. But it's a bit late now that the decades have gone by. And
yeah. It makes you wonder how like if there will be, I guess probably not, just because of the way that streaming has influenced movies, but I feel like that's decimated kind of a lot of possibility for cult classics of now, because it's like they just get pulled or they get written off for tax reasons or whatever.
oh
So
yeah, that's the one that really kills me about that sort of that industry or what they're doing with those. It's like I read this kind of not heartbreaking, but like a sad message from like Will Forte about that Acme.
oh
Wiley
my
Cody
gosh,
versus Acme movie that he was in, saying it was like such a great movie and everyone would have loved it, and he's like so sad that it's never going to come out. And it's like,
somebody should pirate that.
well, I think I'm not 100% sure how this works, but I think I read somewhere that like part of being able to claim it as a tax write-off, you have to delete the movie. It has to be
Oh
completely wiped and never seen. And like apparently, I believe the guys that did the Batgirl movie tried to have it secretly pirated and released, and like Warner caught
yeah,
them before they could, and made sure it was all wiped out. But I know that's why like Christopher Nolan doesn't work for them anymore, because they're doing stuff like this. So you feel like
yeah,
artists would, I guess money's money. If they're giving you millions of dollars to be in something, you're going to take it.
right,
But the idea that like working so hard on this project and putting a lot of passion, hopefully, and love into it, and then having a studio just cap it, even not give it a chance to even try, just because they can make a few extra dollars maybe off it, is soul crushing to me.
yeah, to say the least. No,
Yeah,
it's really disheartening. So I don't know. I hope something changes, but it's hard to
yeah,
say as one
yeah.
person how or when or what will change. But
Well, it's also
I
that the
don't know.
fact like studios tend to like the day of making a $10 million movie and hoping to make $50 million off it are gone. Like almost every movie
Right,
has a budget that's like $200 million, and it needs to make like half a billion or a billion to be a success. Like,
right.
the smaller studios were doing their thing, and now they're like A24, those ones, and now they're becoming bigger studios, and they're almost kind of falling into the same trap. So it's like I just want a
Yeah,
small one that just makes cool, cheap movies that are amazing, and doesn't
stay
need it.
small forever.
Yeah, yeah, except, well,
Yeah.
you don't want to punish them for success, I guess, but
No, that's
just make
fair.
more small movies, whatever, instead of
Right.
but yeah.
Expand the roster for sure. Well,
So when did you start nice segue here. When did you start when did you start doing the comics? Right off of school or
um, yeah, so my first published comic I did for the same people who published Wait. It was an 18-page comic for the Arcana. Actually, I might have a copy the friction, the little like
Oh,
my
yeah.
blur background.
Mhm.
Yeah. To go with the tarot deck because I was working with Danny on the tarot stuff and she invited me to do a script written by Rebecca Roanhorse. And I was like, oh my God, of course. Because that was too cool to say no to. It was such a crunch, but that was like my first official long format, if you can call it that. It was like 18 pages. But that was kind of my break into it. And that was tons of fun. But it was also one of the most stressful things I've ever done in my life because we were under such like a timeline crunch for that. But so that was like the big one. I've done little mini ones for school and like assignments and then I guess weight would probably I like 6 pager for a magazine a few years ago and then weight would be like my third technically, but I like doing little pages and I'm a little intimidated by the scope of like a full project, but that's kind of the next
Well,
goalpost to tackle.
18 pages is
Um,
pretty much a full, it's a few pages short of a full project, essentially, or full issue.
yeah,
So,
for sure. So yeah, I guess you're right in that way. It's for a comic, but it's my goal is like a graphic
oh, full
novel, which
graph, yeah.
maybe I might be a little bit ambitious, but
No, not at all. You gotta shoot for the moon, right? That's
right. I was
that's
like, go big
that's
or go home.
exactly. So how did that? Well,
I'll
how did you
figure it
get
out.
that first book? Like, how did that come along?
For the for Friction, the anthology,
The first,
Arcana,
yeah, the kind of thing.
the
Yeah,
18 page.
yeah.
Yeah. That was I started working with Danny in 2021 when I was like a sophomore in school, I guess, at that point. And she had found my Miss Frizzle fan art I made on Tumblr, um,
That's
of all
awesome.
things.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Hey, man, that's great. I love that. I love stories like that when people are like, I did some weird, fan art thing on DeviantArt and someone found it. That's how my career got started. It's like that's amazing. Like that gives me
No,
hope
yeah,
for artistic future.
that was literally it. Yeah, it was funny. I all my professors at the time were like, don't do fan art, like people won't hire you. Like, and I was like, that's how I got like my first big job as like a student was fan art. But keep my lips shut about that. But if anybody asks me for advice, it's like do fan art because usually that will have the biggest audience. And if you're looking for kind of a social media big break, usually that's a pretty good way to go. But so yeah, we started working on the tarot deck. I was brought on as a minor arcana artist, and that was super fun. And then that summer, Danny had offered it to me, the script by Rebecca, and I was about to start school again, and I was still working on tarot stuff, and I was brought on to do some of the guidebook graphics. And I was like, well, I'm really busy. I'm going to be even busier when school starts. It looks super fun and awesome. I don't know that I have the time for it. So that was kind of that. There's a pin in that. And she's like, that's totally fine. I'll find somebody else. And then I think it was like end of October. I was finishing up my quarter. I had maybe 2 weeks left. And Danny was like, I couldn't find somebody that I wanted to do it more than you. Like they had another artist brought in. I think they tested for it, but they were like, it's not quite hitting what we would like it to. Um, and so she came back and was like, it's going to be kind of a crazy crunch, but do you want to try doing it? And I was like, okay. Like I just finished school, so or at least for the winter break. And I actually had like a trip to New York with my friends for Thanksgiving that week. And the whole week I was starting on preliminary stuff for the comic. So I was trying to be a tourist with my friends, and I'd come back to my friend's apartment and just be like absolutely like a madman, just scribbling out, character designs and thumbnails and trying to get stuff blocked out with her. And then I spent like the next month doing nothing but that comic and coloring it and lettering it and finishing up. So it was crazy. It was such a like whirlwind experience. But that was the first one. And the fact that I went to comics after that, I'm kind of surprised because I was like, I don't want to touch my iPad again after this. But it was fun. And it turned out, considering the fact that I was under such a deadline for it, I think I'm proud of it. But it's been a little while now, so my art's slightly better. So I think I've had time to sit with what I would improve, and it's a learning experience, I guess. But that's kind of how that fell into place. And And then, yeah, she came back to me for, I guess, last fall and had the same thing for Carla's scripts. And I really liked it. And I thought it was very compelling. So that's how both of those fell into place. And I only have Danny Headland to thank for that. So,
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So the project you're working on now, actually, I just gotten sort of an email and then a connection to all of you, and I'm not as familiar with what it is, beyond just that Carla, who I'd had in the show before, is involved with
Yeah.
it. So what is the project that you were?
So it's for the same anthology. It's for the Unseen issue. And Carla wrote the script, and I guess they had met at a convention or something, Carla and Danny, who was like kind of the overseeing editor for all of these issues. And so I think it's a 14 page. I can't remember. I did it a couple months ago, and it kind of turned into the same thing where it was a little bit of a time crunch. But it's just a 14-page short comic about a girl and her dog wandering through a frozen wasteland of like a post-apocalyptic scenery, and it's very barren, kind of The Last of Us vibes, I would say. And yeah, Danny sent me the script, and I love a good girl and her dog story. It had kind of a heartbreaking ending, but all good stories do. So also not super up my wheelhouse. I have not done like a post-apocalyptic thing before. So I was like, sure, why not? Like, that seems tons of fun. I grew up on the Hunger Games, like you said, it was that era of media was very much my adolescence. So why not give it a shot? And it came out better than I expected it to. So I have Carla to thank for that, because I think she wrote a very touching and compelling story.
Awesome. No, I love talking about to other artists about art, because everyone is so deprecating about their work or what they can do. And even like I just talked to Eric Larson a while ago, like the creator of the Savage Dragon comics. And he's like, I still can't draw cars. And I'm like, you've done like 300 issues of this comic. You've been working on it.
Yeah.
Like, you've been in the industry for like 40 years, and you're like, like it's just,
yeah,
it's so funny. Because
it's as an artist, you kind of have to be like that, I feel like, if you want to get better. But
I never trust people that are aren't humble, I guess. And I don't like, I'm not saying people need to be humble. You can be proud of your work, but
sure,
there's some people that are, I guess, arrogant or don't believe there's room for improvement, or at least don't feel bad if they mess up, like stuff like that. Like, it just always, to me, it's just not the type of person I am. So it's always, when I meet folks like that, I'm like, oh, okay, well, we're very different people. So
yeah. No, I think the thing that I'm proudest most of this is like getting through it, and the fact that I finished it on time. There's definitely stuff about both comics that I would go back and adjust if I had more time, but the goal was to get it done and to get something that was publishable out. So as long as you can do that, I'm just gonna step back from it and say it's in their hands. I've done all I can do.
Art, yeah. At least with comics and books and movies and whatever, you need to have a deadline where you're done. I remember reading somewhere that like some of the most famous artists in the world, like once their paintings got bought by huge museums, they would still be in the museums doing touch-ups to the paintings. To which point the people that ran the museums would be like, no, stop, you're done. It's over.
Yeah.
It's a piece now, and they just couldn't like let it go, because there's always something they need to add or change or do something.
Oh, always, especially as time goes by, like I look at the one I did with Rebecca and I'm like, ooh, like I definitely could have, but that's set in stone now. So there's no point ruminating on it and getting super tangled up in it, and just kind of letting it be what it is. And
yeah, it's only certain types that get the chance to go back, and it's like mostly like film directors that are on like such a huge level get to go back and recut their films and putting them out again,
right,
or whatever. It's like,
that must be nice.
I don't know. It feels like, I don't know. I kind of feel like you need to disconnect at some point and give it to the universe or whatever, and let the world enjoy it. Otherwise,
that's true.
It's probably just be a prison that you'll be trapped in forever. Like Francis Ford Coppola has like recut like 10 of his movies in the past like few decades. Even like Dementia 13, which was like a Roger Corman movie he did, like it's like his first movie. It's like, let it go. Go make something else.
Yeah. You do definitely. I feel like there's always like sometimes in a project there might be like one or two things, at least for me, like that really I'm like, oh, I kind of wish I had seen that. But yeah, I feel like when you start to do with everything and all the time, like you definitely do need to move on and allow yourself to learn from it and apply that to something different. But I guess I can't really dunk on Francis Ford Coppola because
Sure you can. I'm sure he's letting you know he's not listening. That'd be
yeah.
amazing if I get like an angry email from Francis Ford Coppola. This is like, dear asshole. That'd be amazing. But speaking
That
of,
would
I
be really
guess
funny.
yeah, it would be. I would have to backpedal for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm a fan for sure of his stuff. I just feel it's like it's interesting, and I guess part of it is like it's not always your decision that the thing that got made isn't the way you want it to be. The studios get
Right.
involved, and after time goes on and your things are considered like classics, you get to make like I don't know 8 versions of Blade Runner, or whatever it is you want to do, like Ridley Scott did or whatever. So it's just it's them trying to make it the way they've always wanted it to be, but sometimes it is what it is, right?
Right.
But
There's definitely a balance.
yeah, speaking of going forward, I guess what's your next project? What are you working on after nowadays? That you can discuss
I'm
if
not,
you can.
yeah, I was going to say there's one I'm not sure. I'm continuing to work with Danny and the folks at Brink, and we've got some cool stuff under wraps. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it.
Oh, that's fine.
I would love to, but I right now I'm trying to write a big long form graphic novel comic of my own. I recently got an agent, so she's working with me, and that's been really helpful to have somebody else hold me accountable. It's like we were talking about, you need to have a deadline and you need to have just at some point say, okay, this is it, give it to somebody else, let them, rework it or point out stuff. And so that's kind of what I'm working on. And then I'm doing children's book illustrations right now, which is fun. But the goal is comics and publishing stories of my own because I've always really liked storytelling. And I would also love to illustrate other people's comics. Honestly, I'm kind of wishing that I had something right now that I was doing because I'm like, I don't want to be writing. This is overwhelming. But
Was this your
yeah,
first writing
so
project, or have you like on your own? Mostly
yes.
besides the smaller ones you've done before.
Yeah, so I've always liked writing. I used to write in high school all the time. I wanted to be an author at one point, which a long time ago. So I don't know if I really have the credibility to be going back and, I don't know. I have a lot of catching up to do skill wise, but yeah. So I would love to really write my own stuff. I There's kind of parts of the market that I feel like I would really like to tap into and explore a little bit more with comics that make stuff that I want to read a little bit more. And I mean, I guess it's all that anybody is making is stuff that they would like to see more of. But
Yeah.
so yeah, this is my first technically full story of my own that's not a short story that I wrote in high school or whatever. So it's a little overwhelming, but I have a really good group of folks behind me that I'm, running things by and letting them check my imposter syndrome and all that fun stuff. But
How are you planning
um,
on distributing? Are you gonna do like a Kickstarter? Or are you gonna?
um, the goal I think is to pitch it to publishers and traditionally and do it like I don't know. Right now, the story that I'm working on, it would be two maybe like serialized a duology of comics. We'll see how that goes. I don't know if I'm going to keep it in 2 books, but um, I've always been somebody to gravitate towards graphic novels more so than comics. I like comics, but I don't know if it's the right story for that. Like I feel like it's got to be a little bit larger. So the goal right now is for sure to pull it to publishers, see how that goes. I would be game to self-publish, but I have a very awesome representative on my side who I think would be very helpful in getting to talk to people who could probably do it much better than I could. So
Awesome.
we'll see. Knock on wood, we'll see how far it goes. But
Well, I won't push to ask you what it's about, but it sounds like it's going to be pretty cool, though. What types of fiction do you generally like to consume? Like, what are the types that you want to see more of out there?
I love like historically based fantasy. So I love like Crimson Peak,
Oh, I
like
love that
especially
movie.
Gothic.
That movie
Yeah,
does not get enough credit for being as good as it is. Everyone
it's
wanted just a straight up
stunning.
ghost story, and they were like, they didn't expect a gothic romance story, and it was fantastic. Visually, it's gorgeous.
It is like objectively, in my opinion, obviously, It is a perfect movie. That's kind of a big inspiration for the story that I'm writing.
Hmm.
It's not exact by any means. There's a lot of deviation, but I think the love for the like world building and the atmosphere that obviously Del Toro is a master of is definitely a big influence. So I've been reading a lot more this year. So I read a lot of obviously fantasy, kind of girly. I've been catching up on YA because I feel like I stopped reading in high school and I'm trying to get back into like, I don't know, reading for teenage me. And then I've been kind of veering back into like history and nonfiction now that I'm like, okay, well, I'm an adult, so I need to read, you know, big girl things. But
Eating your vegetables, we call it. Like when it's like you
yeah,
gotta go back. Like I always wanted to read Moby Dick, and I never did. And I'm like, well, maybe now I should. But I feel like
yeah,
it's gonna be like it'll be a rewarding literary experience, but it's also kind of like eating your vegetables. It's good for
right.
you. You need to do it.
Right. Yeah. It's just intellectually stimulating
Mm.
at least. But yeah, so I've been kind of going back. I have a couple of history books that I'm trudging through and some nonfiction stuff just to like say that I did and have some knowledge in my brain. A lot of it's research for stories, but yeah, so I'm very much a history nerd. I like to read that. That was always my favorite in school. And now that I'm far away enough from that chapter of my life, it's like fun to learn about stuff without being tested on it. So I'm kind of rediscovering that this year. But yeah, so anything like historical or magical or fantasy, like that's my thing. And I don't know. I love like YA comics is kind of what I would like to do, and I don't know how much of that is like out yet. So that's I'm also doing my research and reading a lot of that where it exists at least. So
I feel like there's like a few, like that really hit. I'd say there's probably like, you just see all those scholastic editions of those ones that come out, like the Smile book and like the Amulet
mm-hmm.
books and those ones. Like there's a lot of those. I know it's funny
Right.
because every once in a while there's like a used bookstore in I live in Nova Scotia, Canada. So
Oh, no kidding.
yeah. So
My mom's Canadian.
oh really? Where's she from?
Yeah. Toronto. She was born
Ah.
in Winnipeg, but that's where all my family is right now. So
Oh really? Cool. I've been to
yeah.
Winnipeg and Toronto.
Yeah.
Nice
I haven't
areas.
been to Nova Scotia yet, but I hear it's
Oh.
wonderful.
Well, there's a few Comic Cons that come down this way. There's one in New Brunswick called the East Coast Comic Expo. That one's really
Mm-hmm.
geared towards comics specifically, which is really nice for that.
Uh-huh.
Nick Bradshaw, who's an artist for Marvel and various other things, he lives in New Brunswick and he generally helps with the organization of that one and some other local folks. And there's HowCon,
Mm-hmm.
which is a big one in Halifax, Nova Scotia. But that one tends to be more like they'll have a lot of like science fiction people, and then like
Yeah.
comics are just like in a little section over here, which
Yeah.
but I sell art prints and stuff, so I usually go to them to sell stuff, so I'll be there. But yeah, like the East Coast one is super cool because it's close to
Cool.
Nova Scotia, close enough to travel to.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, but in our town here, there's like a little store that I go to a lot, usually just to pick over for books. I read a lot, and they have a lot of like these ones. Like it seems like Doug Tenapal, who did like Earthworm Jim, does a ton of
Mm-hmm.
them. There's like Ghostopolis and like Cardboard Kingdom or something, and
Yeah.
a ton of them that are really fun because I always liked his style and his art. Like Earthworm Jim was
Mm-hmm.
kind of a big thing when I was a kid, the video game and the TV cartoon. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I love the like resurgence of YA books and I feel like it's having its moment right now. Maybe that's like my sphere. I'm
no, I think
kind of
so.
more into like traditional publishing and I feel like books are having a comeback with my generation for one reason or another, but I love the like kind of adventure fantasy like visuals, but I feel like that's mostly in like comics, like
Mhm.
serialized and my goal is to maybe bring a little bit more of that to like traditional imprints of graphic novels, but I
Mhm.
don't the fun part will be seeing if they want that. So um
Yeah, that's the
we'll
scary
see.
part too, though. It's hoping the
Right.
market is there, and then it's yeah, it's a bit iffy if you find there isn't. But I think as far as like people that really dig independent comics or like just even like YA comics or whatever,
Right.
I feel like that they seem to keep making significant amount of them. So I feel like the desire is there and the market is
Oh,
huge.
for sure.
But and
Yeah.
like even I don't have any children, but like I have a lot of friends that recently have had kids in the past few years, and
Hmm.
all of them are like 2, 3 now, and they're getting into like books a little bit and like these shows and these things and learning about like a lot of the the really popular things that kids like are a lot of these DIY things, like YouTube stars like Blippi or like
Yeah.
Jojo Siwa or whatever. Like I
Oh
don't
my
really know.
gosh. Yeah.
I don't really know them, but like I just know them because I'm told of them by my friends whose kids
Right.
are obsessed with them. So like
Yeah.
knowing that, like these are all the sort of people that sort of made themselves just through doing videos on YouTube. It also really bothers me that I didn't think to do that. Like you're like, you're like, oh man, that Blippy guy, I could have done that. Like, why didn't I think of
Yeah.
that first? So
It seems like the easiest solutions, and so like quick, but somehow somebody always comes up with it before, you can. So
wow.
I know what you mean. It's kind of frustrating, but
It's also weird because you don't know what's going to hit. Like, who knows, right? There's probably 16 other Blippies that fell by the wayside before that one was adopted by
right.
everybody, right?
The magic formula for it. Yeah.
I think
It
that
is.
might be a
Yeah.
great fictional story. Is like the wannabe, the guy that tries really hard to be that guy but fails, like that.
And watches the other one succeed.
It's like Taxi
Yeah.
Driver, but with like a YouTube kid
Oh,
star.
jeez.
That'd be
That would be
amazing.
really good.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
really good.
Turn it into like a thriller almost. That would
Yeah,
be.
yeah, like a dark, like grimy crime thriller. I guess they kind of made a movie years ago called Death to Smoochie, which was sort of
Mhm.
that sort of idea. Rob Williams was in it and Edward Norton, and it was like a kind of a
Ooh.
kid. It was almost like a takeoff of Barney. That was like the new thing, replacing the old guy that was like the kid star that is trying to sabotage
Yeah.
it. And it's pretty dark.
Oh.
But the idea of those sort of things, I always like things that I always like genres that kind of go in a way you don't expect them to, or at least play with conventions and really have fun with them.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that always makes it like an interesting and novel,
Mm.
read through or watch through. So I agree with you there. So
That's cool that you're a fan of Del Toro. I managed to go to when I was in Toronto many years ago. They had an exhibit at the AGO, the Art Gallery
mhm.
of Ontario, of like he has a house that's like all of his stuff, like it's
I've
props
heard
from his
about
movie.
that.
Yeah, so they split it up and they
Yeah,
brought it to different museums. So I got to walk
that's so
around,
cool.
and they had a bunch of props from the Crimson Peak there, like the costumes,
Ah,
like all the
I'm
women's
so
dresses
jealous.
and stuff, and the ghost
Oh,
the ghost thing with half a head, like the model for that and stuff.
that's so cool. I didn't know
It,
they did that.
it was neat. They had a few props, and on that show, that podcast I told you about, they have an episode about his Mountains of Madness movie that never got made, the H.P. Lovecraft one,
I
and
should check that one out.
he had a few props there from that, like the penguins and stuff that were like kind of diseased and falling apart and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I hope they'll let him make that. I mean, why not? Like
I mean,
he's
it's him.
proven
Like
himself
he's gonna
time and
do it.
time again.
Right. He's got it. He'll do
Yeah.
it.
Like
Like,
I don't did Pinocchio win the Oscar this year? I didn't pay attention to the animated
I,
Oscar winning.
I don't think it did. I watched it, but it was so long ago. It feels like it was. I think it was. Was it the Spider-Man one? I feel like it might have been
Oh no, I
Spider-Man.
don't think that one won one either. It was it'll come to me in a minute. I don't think the Disney one won
Oh,
either.
Boy and the Heron. That's what it
Right.
was.
Of course. Yes.
Yeah, I was
Well,
gonna say.
hey, if you're gonna lose, at least lose to Miyazaki for sure.
Right. That's not a bad competition to lose out
No,
on, I
it
feel
actually
like.
was a solid year for animated
Yeah.
films for sure.
Oh, I remember Disney wasn't in there, and that made me kind of happy for I was like, oh, thank
Yeah,
God.
because Wish was the big one, right? That they were like pushing like hard that tanked. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
I
was
never
like,
saw
if they
that one.
put that in there, I'm gonna be so sad. That was I'm glad. I'm glad that Miyazaki took that. I think that was much more well deserved.
Yeah, that was an interesting film. I did see that one as well, and I really liked it too. His
Yeah.
movies are almost like dreams, though. Like
Yes.
they don't feel like a linear thing, almost like an experience more than a movie. It's like happening to you.
Yeah, they are very surreal.
Yes.
Yeah, from I haven't watched all of them, but the ones I have watched, and they're very captivating in that way.
I need to catch up on a few. I went back and watched Totoro and I've seen Princess Mononoke when it came out, but and I've seen The Boy, the Blue Heron, but I missed quite a few of the others. Like I never seen Kiki's Delivery Service or uh there's another
That
big
one's
one
a
there.
charming one. That's
Yeah.
one of I watched that with my dad a while ago, and that
Oh
was
really?
it
Oh
was
cute.
yeah, it was cute.
Yeah. It's fun. It's like my cousin was telling me that he was watching Totoro with his kid, and it's fun that like it's cool to me that it continues on like generationally. The new kids are getting to enjoy it and do their own thing.
Oh yeah. No, that's it. I would rather raise my kids on Miyazaki than Wish. I feel
Yeah.
like, if you're gonna do it, you gotta do it. I feel like they're a little bit more like emotionally subdued. There's like that. I forget who said it, but someone was talking about. Might have been Del Toro actually, about how like modern kids movies are so like saccharine and like it's like emotional pornography because it's just so ramped up. And I feel like Miyazaki has that like very subdued and human touch on it, and I really appreciate that. So I would definitely show that to my kids if I had any. But
I never heard it explained that way, but it is kind of true. It's funny because Del Toro's Pinocchio movie felt like that too to me. I really, really, really liked it. I thought it was fantastic.
yeah,
But it's not afraid to sit in human emotions and like really, and like the Boy the Heron one is interesting because it's never so linear to say like this is about death or this is about that. It's like roundaboutly about that. Like a lot of his movies are
yeah,
sort of like about death and like his relationship with his mother and all these other things, but it's like they're not so overt. They're sort of subtle, and they're also like so beautiful in how they're depicted that you kind of like are almost overwhelmed by the visuals along with the emotional. So you're just sort of like you sit there and you just sort of let it wash over you.
yeah, for sure. It's just so much better than the like, I don't know. I feel like the flashy colors and the over dramatic stuff of, I guess, I don't know, like DreamWorks or maybe Sony. I like some of Sony's stuff though. I think those are charming, but it does get to a point where it's like I feel like kids need to learn to just sit and like not have everything necessarily like pushed, onto them in a story sense. And so I think it's good that people like dealt, because I think it was in relation to Pinocchio that he was talking about that, about how
Mhm.
he just wants to make movies, like animated movies about like regular people doing like human things. And like that's not something that is really that prevalent in mainstream animation anymore. And it's,
Certainly
I
not
don't
like
know.
there was a period where you would get the occasional animated film that was designed for adult people, like adults.
Right.
In the days of that, I mean, the things we get now are sort of these nostalgia-driven things, like the new X-Men cartoon or something, that are like
Right.
are geared towards people like me that watched the original show growing up and want to experience that again, and they make it more adult to kind of appeal to us. But it's
Hmm.
you know, to do a new property that's sort of just out there, like back in the day they had the HBO Spawn series that was sort of a dime for adults, like or weird like Charlie Kaufman. Is it Charlie Kaufman or the other guy? Spike Jones, who did like Anomalisa or those weird like those sort of movies.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of those sort of things anymore, or like the Richard Linklater movies that are like Scanner Darkly or those sort of things, which are retroscoped but still animated, or
Yeah.
Heavy Metal to go further back, or any of those sort of things. But you don't
Yeah.
see a lot of those anymore. So
No, it's well, and I think there's just such a stigma around it about it being for kids. And I feel like Jimmy Kimmel makes that stupid joke every year at the Oscars of like, I think this year was like your kids voted on the animated ones. And it's like, that's not the case. Lots of
yeah,
adults, can also enjoy it. It's a medium for everyone. And obviously, a lot of the demographic is kids because it's digestible, but like, there can be animated shows for adults that adults enjoy. Like I feel like Scavenger's Reign, that's like a good example of like
mm-hmm.
that's not really a kids show, but it's like an adult nice animation. Like it's not like a Simpsons or Family Guy where it's like, okay, it's
Yeah, yeah.
funny and it's for adults, but it's kind of there's no like art to it in the sense
Mm.
of like the visuals. But so I don't know. It's I hope it
Yeah.
changes. I think people are fighting back against that stigma, but
Well, every
I
once in a
hope in the
while they'll do
future.
something that seems to hit big, and like you can't tell me Rick and Morty is designed for kids.
Oh no, yeah,
like I love that show deeply, and it's
right,
definitely no kid is going to get any half of the, and not even a third of the stuff in that is designed for
for sure.
apathetic or nihilistic adults like myself.
Yeah,
But
but even that's like a TV show, right? So
yeah,
like, and then it's like the movies. I feel like are always the ones where it's like,
yeah,
well, that can't be for adults. But yeah, the shows I feel like people, which is weird that it's like you can
I
accept that
know.
adults have animated shows, but not movies. But
Well,
you know,
even the days of like big properties being movies, it seems like they go to shows first now because
hmm
instead of well, I guess like Lord of the Rings is a bad example because you get like 3 3-hour movies, but which is basically a mini series
I was gonna
eventually.
say,
But like Fallout or all these things that are now just going straight to
yeah,
the current example. that have gone straight to streaming services, and like the Lord of the Rings series that was on Prime, and
Yeah.
all these the Game of Thrones stuff, like all that stuff. It's just all these big properties just seem to go straight to series now. They're the Shogun one
Hmm.
plus, which I've heard is good. But
Yeah.
so yeah, it's a weird time. It's I mean, it's cool. It's also like overwhelming because there's just so much. It's hard to watch half of everything that you're told to watch.
Yeah. Struggle to keep up with that too. It's
It's the
never
worst.
ends.
I have
Yeah.
like I just finally watched True Detective, the first season, which came out.
Oh, how
Amazing.
was that? I
I
haven't
loved it.
watched it.
It's fantastic.
Okay. It's on
But
my list.
yeah, it's one I've been putting off for years. And then when I started working just for myself, I have more time to like watch stuff while I'm working. So I've been catching up a
Yeah.
lot on that. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
That's I've heard good things about that one.
that's great if you like that sort of dark nihilistic true crime sort of thing.
Oh, sure. I
It's
love
not
like
true, but
Mindhunter and stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Awesome.
fun.
Cool. Well, is
Yeah.
there any appearances or events or anything you got coming up?
Nope.
No.
I'm
No,
quietly working. Yeah, it's I guess things will come up and I will post about them, but for the time being, I'm kind of laying low and getting some projects to have to talk about in the future. So,
cool. Well, where do people find
yeah,
your work in well, I guess I didn't have a lot of time to talk about your actual work, like your style, which I love, by
yeah.
the way. It's
Well,
fantastic.
thank you.
It's I
Thank you.
love talking to you about the like the nature of your love of Gothic storytelling and stuff.
Hmm.
It very much that clicks with me based on what I was looking at. I was looking at some of your work.
Yeah.
There's this beautiful sort of Gothic feel to it, which I
Well,
really
thank
like.
you.
So
I
it's
appreciate that.
yeah, it's cool. It's neat when you talk to folks like yourself on the show and learn their inspirations or what they're into, and it gives you a real insight into where their art style comes from because it's probably the stuff that they consume the most.
Oh, for sure.
So,
Yeah.
but there's definitely a beautiful. I'm very curious to see the kids' book that you're working on. That should be interesting, especially because your style is so ethereal. Like I'd be curious to see what that would lend itself to when it comes to a children's book.
Yeah, it's definitely, I had to kind of like adjust my style for it. I sent like a sample illustration that I did of the characters to the director that I'd be working with, and we ended up kind of like shifting the way that I'm drawing for it, which is like weird, but it paid well. So I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll stop being a waiter, like, and work on this silly little kids adventure. But it's fun. It's actually like I feel like it's a good challenge because I've had to like really simplify and scale back on what you're showing and how you're drawing things. So I think it's a good exercise in restraint and just you know usually in my work personally, I like to really hyper focus on details and making sure everything looks like right. And so it's a very different style, but I think obviously it still bleeds into a lot of what I do normally, but it's just kind of translated in a different way. But yeah, it's a little different, but it's fun. I'm kind of having more fun with it than I expected to. It's brighter, it's different color palette that I'm used to, so it's been a fun exercise. So
That's awesome.
I
Cool.
can't complain.
Well, where do folks find your work online?
Yeah, so you can find me at the.flightless.artist on Instagram. That's kind of my big main hub of I keep that probably the most up to date. And then I'm Flightless Artist on Twitter. Flightless is in like can't fly. I don't know. Sometimes people like don't. It's a weird word. It was an old username. I've had that Instagram account since I was
What are they getting
13.
confused with?
I don't know. They just they're like, what? It's not even like that they hear something else. It's just like, why
Okay.
is that? It's like a band reference from
Oh, that's
when I
fine.
was 15, but it's stuck and that's like kind of the brand now, unfortunately. I debated whether or not I should just switch it.
Well, it's a good thing you picked something kind of artsy and different, and you weren't really into like, I don't know, corn or something. It's
Right.
like
It's almost poetic. Yeah, no, it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
I had a couple iterations and that was the one that just stuck. And I think I grew a lot, like my platform grew a lot under that. So I was like, well, it feels kind of weird if I change it, but I might have to soon.
No,
But
I
we'll
think it's
see.
fine.
But
I'm
yeah, so
pretty sure people can navigate the flightless artist. It's not that hard to remember. And it's kind
I
of
think so.
memorable to me. Like, I know, clicks. I remember it.
Well, that's good. I think it's just funny, like if I share it with people, I don't usually talk about my Instagram to people I just meet, but usually people that I'm around will talk about it before me, and they'll be like, well, what is it? And then I tell them, and it's like, what? Like,
Just add
look,
me and shut up.
yeah, let me type it in. Like,
Yeah.
I literally will just, anyway. So yeah, you can find me there. And then there's usually links. I have a link in my bio. IsabelBurke.com is my portfolio site, but that's probably the last one to get updated with new stuff. So Instagram's probably the easiest way to keep up, but
Awesome.
yeah. Well, yeah.
I look forward to checking all that out.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
It was, and it's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to seeing the next project.
Well, thank you. Keep your eyes peeled. It'll be a little while down the line, but it's coming.
Feel free to send it off to me, and I'll push it in all the stuff I have this on too. So
perfect. Well, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you, Isabel. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Talk to you. Bye.
There it is, my chat with Isabel Burke. Be sure to check out her social media on her Instagram and her webpage. On Instagram, it's Flightless Artist, which is funny. She was talking about how she may have to change it. I don't think it's that bad. However, it's interesting when you're younger, like when you start these art pages and you have to choose a name. Be careful what you choose, because sometimes it might stick and then you're stuck with it. It's like when you run into people that still have like the same email address they had back in high school, like CanucksFan@gmail.com or FredDurstLover69@hotmail.com. Oh man, I hope there's a Fred Durst Lover at hotmail.com out there. Fred Durst Lover 69 specifically at hotmail.com out there. Because if so, your email address just got the coveted Graphic Histories bump. So, you lucky so-and-so you. Our next guest of the show is Jim Calafiore, who is a artist who's worked on a lot of cool projects. Most recently, a lot of stuff for Marvel. He worked on the Exiles comic, and amongst others, done some really cool work, and I'm very excited to get a chance to chat with him. So that's going to be coming up on our next episode. Be sure to tune in then, but in the meantime, stay safe, have fun, and go read some comics. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.